Hey guys, it's Troll 9002. Early Monday morning at 2:05 a.m. I wrote a pretty long story. It's 7 pages double spaced, so probably only read half of it and continue it next Sunday. Don't mean to leave you with a cliffhanger, but I'm gonna leave you with a cliffhanger. Sorry. This one's called Shore Watchers. Okay, so Emily was brought up in a big city where you trust no one. You don't look away from your personal stuff like phone, wallet, and car keys. Valuables. This is one of the reasons why most people had a pool or some kind of water feature in the backyard instead of going to the beach. Emily loved being at the beach, but she was afraid of the water. She had seen Jaws one too many times, and she really couldn't swim well, so she really had no business being in the water. But she loved the waves, the smell, the wind that blew through her hair as she sat and watched her friends under the umbrella. Emily for a long time thought that she was the only shore watcher in the world. What I mean by shore watcher is she would go out with groups of friends, and when they would strip off their shirts and valuables to go in the water, she would sit under the umbrella and watch the stuff so no one took it. For a long, long time she did this until her family moved far, far away from the traditional beach, and they moved closer to a river. This was not a bad thing for Emily because she made friends, just a couple, and they were also shore watchers. Most of the time, shore watchers were the quiet kids that took a lot of abuse but remained devoted to their job of making sure the valuables were kept safe. That was their own moral code, was to keep the valuables safe. Most of the time in Florida, everybody wore shorts and skirts and stuff to keep their tans or their burns. The shore watchers always wore pants of some kind because they seemed to burn really easy. Now, when Emily lived by the beach, global warming was going on, and it always seemed to be hotter wherever she was, especially if she had shorts on. She just thought it was global warming, or was it? Emily had started a shore watcher. They would hang out and chat while the water people were out in the water having a good time. These kids only needed each other to have fun, no water needed. But they were all too lazy to get up without a purpose. Seeing they could use the water kids as an excuse to hang out, it was very rare that Emily would wear shorts, but in July it was very hard for her to keep her legs covered. She had a dream to one day have two legs, but she knew better. All she would have was a sunburn. It would be a horrible sunburn. Even in the shade of a great big tree, she would burn. But the bonus there was her legs would peel, and she could peel them. That is what passes for fun in Emily's world. Her friends Steve and Frida were shore watchers just like Emily was. Their people always lied to them and asked them to come to the river to have fun with them, even though all they wanted was a shore watcher. Steve and Frida were mighty good company to Emily, and all three developed a very strong bond and looked forward to their days at the springs and the river, and anywhere else they were needed as shore watchers. It was a super hot day in July, and Emily couldn't handle wearing her long pants anymore. And even though she didn't go in the water due to the alligators and snakes her brother and sister used to scare her with, she had a bathing suit on. So she took her pants off to cool off, and they revealed her very white, ghostly legs. Feeling just as hot and confident, Steve and Frida followed suit, revealing their ghostly white legs. It seemed as soon as the sun hit the white of their legs, the day seemed to get way hotter, which was odd. The National Weather Service reported a global hotspot the same day, and a new hole in the ozone layer. It was a long day, but the kids had a blast, the ones in the water, and the shore watchers. They spent the day talking about crazy vacations they had with their families, and things they wanted to see before they were gone. Frida wanted to see specific endangered animals before they were gone for good. Steve wanted to see common sense come back before it was gone. Emily kept things simple. Emily just wanted to see snow with someone special. A friend or a family member. It didn't matter. She just wanted to see snow. Just not by herself. I mean, how would a Florida girl know how to drive in snow? Probably would wreck her car, even though it is just a roller skate. Anyway, So the whole month of July, the three kids decided they were going to keep working on their sunburns and their peeling skills. Yes, they knew it wasn't good for the skin, but by this year in 2023, they had made an anti-skin cancer cream that worked on every skin tone and type, so it was okay. The strange thing is, the National Weather Service had its biggest global warming spikes ever in the same month. One could only guess what that was going on at this point. So finally, there was a meteorologist that made a trip out to the river and the springs. The hot spots seemed to appear, to observe if there was a volcano vent or something that opened up to create the hot spots. Everything seemed to be fine. The water was typical 72-degree spring water that always bubbled up from the earth, and the river flowed its natural temp, which was spring water, but slightly warmer. And he couldn't for the life of him figure out what the deal was. So he radioed into the station to see if they had hot spots on the map or not. And they had nothing on radar, yet. But it was early in the day, so the meteorologist decided to stay for a while. The water was nice, but he too was a shore watcher. So he just hung out under a tree and watched the water flow. And after a while, the kids showed up after school. Typical hot Florida day, teenagers everywhere, shore watchers everywhere. Steve, Frida, and Emily showed up with their kids, with their stuff to watch. They collected the valuables they were responsible for and proceeded to make themselves comfortable under the huge oak tree that had likely been there forever and a day. But there was plenty of room for shore watchers to congregate under it. They had their own cliques and didn't bother with the other cliques. As Emily took her clothes off, they revealed her white legs and her arms this time, which were not as white, but they were not tan either. Frida and Steve did the same, and they were still white, very, very white. When the meteorologist felt the temp go up in the general area, he radioed back to the the weather station, and they were tracking the hot spots. And they gave him the exact coordinates where Steve, Frida, and Emily were sitting. It didn't take James the meteorologist long to figure out they were the hot spots. He walked over to talk to the kids, introduced himself, and started asking them questions. Well, Emily was not comfortable with James being around. Even though she had seen him on the local news doing the weather, she didn't like strangers, no matter if they had introduced themselves, or if they were public figures, or whatever. So she excused herself. Frida followed her back to check on her and make sure she was okay, and also to get away from James herself. And when the two hot spots vanished from the radar, James knew it was the kids, because Steve's hot spot was still there. Unsure what to do at this point, James started telling Steve about global warming and the hot spots that were popping up on the radar. He asked Steve to cover his legs for a minute to do a check, and so Steve did, and the hot spot was gone off the radar. The global temp started to go down just a hair, but enough to make a difference. Frida and Emily came back to check on Steve, and everything was fine. This is when James told them his theory about global warming and how they were making it worse. What was happening to the world was the ice caps were melting way too fast, and the world was going to flood faster. There was no more snow in the northern states, and in fact, even the North Pole was experiencing a snow shortage. Poor Santa. And it was at this point Emily figured out it was too late to fulfill her dream of seeing snow, because by now it was unfixable. The world was in trouble. Feeling sad, Emily told the people she was shore watching for she had to go, and she just asked another shore watcher to watch their stuff. Said goodbye to Steve and Frida and left. Emily went home to sulk and to drive herself batty about how she shoulda, coulda, woulda seen the snow if only she hadn't held out for someone to see it with her. It was that day that she decided she was going to start doing whatever she wanted. No more shore watching. She was going to travel, which meant she was always going to wear pants or long skirts of some kind. And Frida and Steve went back to wearing their pants and shirts because they were the cause of the instant global rising of temps. You see, the sun reflected off the white legs of the kids, and the reflection was direct sunlight back into the sky. And their legs were like big long mirrors, and it was because of how white the legs were. I can't say for sure, but somewhere in between seeing the coast of Maine with her cousin, stopping by Boston to see her friend Kendra, and New York to see Bob and Bonnie. By the time she got down to Virginia, she had to go home. She had run out of money and had to work hard to get more. And so she went back to shore watching, which paid great. Rich kids, high quality values to be kept safe. There was good money there. It was great to be able to spend a few weeks chilling with Steve and Frida. Frida did the same thing that Emily did. She started going to different animal preserves to find all the endangered animals on her list that she wanted to see before they were extinct. And Steve changed his mind. He felt like common sense was never going to make a comeback in style, so he decided to go see the pyramids in Egypt before the sand reclaimed them. But Emily was still determined to see snow. Problem was, global warming had almost eradicated snow. That made a lot of northerners happy because they no longer had to deal with snow and they were no longer called snowbirds, and there was a lot they no longer bothered with. Finally, it was the year 2025, and a private company, much like SpaceX, had finally made a ray gun that could fix a hole in the ozone layer and cool the planet off. Just how that worked, nobody knew for sure. Finally, the long-lasting guilt that Emily had felt for warming the world and getting rid of the snow was gone. It was July again, and it seemed like it was fall in Florida. The ray gun had worked too well, and the world was headed back to what seemed like an ice age. Well, it so happened that year, Emily met a neat, weird person that was a lot like her and her friends, and she invited him to join them as a shore watcher. That was her way of including him, and asking him to come to the spring that day. And accepted, and he wasn't afraid, and a very social person himself, so he fit right in with Steve and Frida. And they liked Paul. As it so happens, that day, it began to snow in Florida. It didn't feel cold enough for snow, but shore watchers were covered up. But it happened. Emily held out hope for seeing snow with the special person, and even though she tried on her own and didn't get it, she didn't give up hope like Steve did. Frida, since completing her list of endangered animals, made an even longer one and started on that. It was amazing. Snow. The only time Emily had been close to snow was in a movie theater watching a 3D movie. A few months later, Paul went home to Alaska where the snow had returned, and he went back to run the family dog sled business. And finally, it was October, and the snow had kept falling, making Emily regret ever wanting to see snow. And so James, the weatherman, who had disappeared, come back and begged the kids to reflect the sun again off of their white legs. And of course, as smart as they were, they all had requirements before they were going to cause global warming again. Steve wanted common sense back. Frida wanted to open the world's biggest animal preserve. And Emily just wanted cash to travel with, so in the right season she could see snow whenever she wanted. Even if that meant traveling to Alaska 2 or 3 times a year. And so all the demands were met, and all the white-legged shore watchers of the world united, and global warming was almost instant. And even with the repaired ozone layer hole, the globe was able to maintain the right temperature, where the polar ice caps were no longer melting. With common sense restored, people were again civil to each other, and no matter what. And the delightful season back summer was cut short by the chill ray gun, thanks a lot to Space L. We appreciate you. There was no need for Emily to travel anymore because every state had 4 seasons. Yes, it snowed in Florida every year on a white Christmas. And even though the Northerners still complained about it, Emily was happy to see it every year. She never saw Paul again, but thought of him often. It was okay. Emily ended up falling in love with someone else and got married. Never had kids and never saw James the weatherman again. He was so busy on his book tour. His book was about finding hot spots of the world and either covering them up or smothering them out. Emily felt luck that she had a chance to see snow with a friend and remembered when she kicked herself for waiting so long. Look. I hope the lesson from this story is don't wait to travel. By the time you get to retirement age, you're going to be too tired, or you're going to be unable to do it. Back off from the million-hour work weeks, days. Realize you are not immortal, and you won't live forever. Do something different when you feel like it. If it means using your sick time or getting to the point where you can just call out, life moves on, and your job will only replace you when you're gone. Get out and do it. Only do this safely and when you have the means to do it. And wear a mask, wash your hands constantly until the nasties are gone. Hopefully we can keep the nasty beer vid in 2020 and advance past it into 2021. Who knows though? Just don't wait. Don't wait to do your stuff. Just do it. This is Troll 9002. I hope you enjoyed my story. And I'm signing off for the night. I hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for your views and your subscriptions and your comments and your likes. Love responding to your comments. I love that you guys are so lost in the story world with me. I appreciate you all taking the time to watch my channel. If you haven't subscribed, do it if you dare. Until the next page turn. Take care.